Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror movie review as part of my 31 Horror Movies in May series. So today we're going to be taking a look at definitely the most recent film from this series, and one of the most recent films in my entire collection that I own in terms of a movie that literally just came out like in the last year. And that, of course, is Last Night in Soho, sorry. Last Night in Soho, um, which came out last year, 2021. I have the Blu-ray, DVD, and digital code pack here. Um, so yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. So this is the first time I watched this movie for this review. Didn't get a chance to see it in theaters last year when it came out, and I hadn't watched it prior to now. So let's just go ahead and get into it to set up the premise and the cast, and then I'll give you my thoughts and review, which will be spoiler free as much as it can be anyway. So, Last Night in Soho is a 2021 British psychological horror film directed by Edgar Wright and co written by Wright and Christy Wilson Cairns. So the film opens with Eloise Ellie Turner loves music and fashion of the swinging 60s and dreams of becoming a fashion designer. Her mother, also a fashion designer, killed herself during Ellie's childhood, and as a result, Ellie was raised by her maternal grandmother. Ellie occasionally sees her mother's ghost in mirrors. Ellie moves from her rural home in Redruth, Cornwall, to London to study at the London College of Fashion, where she has trouble fitting in with her peers, particularly her snobby roommate, Jocasta. Only John, another student, is sympathetic to her. Unhappy in the halls of the residence, she moves into a bedsit owned by the elderly Miss Collins. That night, Ellie has a vivid dream where she is transported back to the 1960s. At the Café de Paris, she observes a confident young blonde woman, Sandy, inquire about becoming a singer at the club. Sandy begins a relationship with the charming teddy boy manager, Jack. The next morning, Ellie designs a dress inspired by Sandy, and Jocasta discovers a love bite on Ellie's neck. Ellie has another dream in which Sandy successfully auditions at the Soho nightclub, arranged by Jack before returning to the same bedsit that Ellie has rented. Inspired by these visions, Ellie dyes her hair blonde, changes her fashion style to match Sandy's, uses her uses her as an inspiration for her dress designs, and gets a job at a pub. She is observed by a sober haired man who recognizes her similarities to Sandy's. In further dreams, Ellie discovers Sandy is not living the life she hoped for and is now being pimped out by Jack to his male business associates. So basically, the dreams become nightmares. So that's kind of the setup and the premise, the early on part of this movie. Cast wise, we have uh, Thomason McKenzie as Eloise Ellie Turner. Anna Taylor Joy as Sandy or Alexandra Alex Collins. Diana Rigg as Miss Alexandra Collins, the older Sandy. Matt Smith as Jack. Michael Joe as John. Terrence Stamp as Lindsay, or the silver haired gentleman. Rita Tushingham as Margaret Peggy Turner, Ellie's maternal grandmother, and Sanov 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 Karison is Jocasta. Sorry, some of these names are kind of hard to pronounce. So yeah, that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for this movie. Last Night in Soho. So this is a movie that I remember seeing previews for last year, the year before it came out, and thinking, wow, that looks really weird and interesting. So I purchased this a few months ago and just finally watched it for the first time, obviously, for this review as part of this series. And my takeaway from it is very mixed. And let's just kind of get into it, starting with the things I liked about the movie, and then I'll get into the things that didn't work for me as well. So, starting with the pros for this movie, you got to start with the fact that it has a very unique style with a very unique sort of idea and premise where certain eras or decades in time aren't. Basically, the takeaway is that as much nostalgia as people have for certain time periods or eras or even decades, they're not all we tend to over glamorize them and forget about some of the shit things that are also involved during that time period. There's bad things that went on too, and that's kind of the big takeaway that this movie I think is trying to say. At least that's what I took away from it. So it's a very unique sort of idea and premise there because I haven't really seen too many other movies like that. And then of course the style is very unique. That this movie's the style that it's actually told in is very unique and stand out as well. The performances of both Thomason McKenzie. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name right. Uh, Thomason? No, it's Thomason McKenzie and Anna Taylor Joy are really strong. Both of them give terrific performances in the leads of this movie. They both come off as likable and relatable for a lot of people. And it's also wonderful. It's really good to see two strong female leads um, carrying this movie basically. So yeah, they do a really good job. They're both really good actresses, although I'm not sure I'd seen Thomas and Mackenzie in anything else. I know she's been in a few other movies before this. She's rather young yet. I think she's only 2021 at the time this movie was made. Anna Taylor Joy obviously has been in The Witch, which is one of my favorite recent horror movies. Obviously Split, and the follow up to it is with um, Glass. And she's really good in everything I've seen her in. So definitely good in this movie. Um, the production design of this movie is wonderful. Amazing set designs that really take you and make you feel like you're back in the 1960s. Also, wonderful costume design used in this movie. Very effective. The visual flair in this movie, along with the camera work and the cinematography, is excellent. Great shots, especially what they do with the mirrors throughout the movie from the beginning all the way to the end is very impressive. Changing characters from a twist or a turn here to like the editing in this movie as well, and the way that they change from one main character to another, the color palette that they use, it all makes for a very easy on the eyes watching and viewing experience of this movie. um, it's a pretty solidly directed film by Edgar Wright, who's obviously got a lot of talent as a director. He takes a very unique idea and executes it with great visual flair and a very unique storytelling style. Um, as I said, also wonderful. He does a great job of editing. And then my final pro is I really enjoyed the mystery aspect of this movie that we get, especially like in the middle of the movie where the dreams turn into nightmares and we're trying to figure out where things are going to go with this movie. It takes a while to get to the darker parts of this movie. Like the first 45 minutes are literally just this young lady, the main character. The story sort of unfolding and her going off to this fashion college or fashion school here in London and meeting some other classmates and not getting along with them, and ultimately it gets us to where she moves into this bed sit place, and that's really where the story really starts in terms of a horror standpoint. But even with that, it still takes another 10 or 15 minutes, even when she takes the bed sit availability and moves in there. It's still a while before we get to the more of the nightmare sequences. So um, there's a mystery aspect to it that I really enjoyed. So yeah, those are my pros. And as you can see, there are a lot of technical aspects of this movie are what really make it a very interesting and, like I said, easy on the eyes watch. Unfortunately, where the cons are going to come into place that I'm going to get into next have to do with the landing, that it doesn't quite stick in the horror aspects of this movie, which it doesn't quite stick for me, unfortunately. And that's I have to bring them up because this channel is a horror movie review channel. So the horror aspects of the movie aren't quite as strong for me, especially the overuse of the faceless men ghost that they use. If you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. About halfway through the movie, or a little bit beyond an hour and a half into the movie, hour 10 minutes into the movie, we start seeing these apparitions of ghosts by a certain group of characters in the movie. And this is where I think Edgar Wright didn't have as much horror experience, and it was kind of obvious as talented a director as he is on the whole, from a horror standpoint, this was his first quote unquote horror movie that he directed. And this is really where it shows. He just really forces it. He really pushes these ghost apparitions way too much. and it was kind of distracting for me, quite frankly. Especially in the third act, they pushed that button a little bit too much, and the fact that they just weren't really that scary. I didn't feel like I wasn't scared by these ghosts. Some of the reveals and twists aren't as good or unique as I was wanting. We get answers in the third act to interesting questions that we came up with in the first two acts, but unfortunately it doesn't deliver. They give us things and ideas that we've seen before and that are a lot more conventional with the questions that we had going into the third act, and that was just really disappointing. It kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth. Overall, the movie just isn't that scary, and the third act of this movie was a bit of a letdown from what was being built up. I think they were kind of building, and then we kind of got to the third act, and it was kind of like just like a big weight. At least that's how I felt about it. As I said, this is a slow burn movie, and it's really a slow burn movie. Like literally, the first almost hour of this movie has nothing to do with horror. You're really watching more of a fantastical or fantasy kind of fantasy drama kind of movie, setting up characters, and that's all fine and good as long as it as long as we get a good payoff to it. And unfortunately, we don't here, so that's why I have to bring it up. They just don't really stick the landing with this movie. I didn't like the very end where it seemed like Ellie or Eloise, depending on how you what name you want to go by, didn't change or have any kind of character arc. She still ended up taking inspiration from this period that she found out was bad from this person, this character that she sort of idolized, which, well, I don't want to give too much away, but if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. She doesn't learn, I don't want to say she doesn't want to learn a lesson because she doesn't really need to learn a lesson, but based on what had happened to her in the third act, it's like nothing, none of that happened, basically. No kind of character arc, despite everything she went through. It just doesn't make any sense from a horror or a movie standpoint. So, yeah, it's kind of a this is kind of a hard movie to recommend. I think I would recommend it to everybody as a one-time watch because I recognize that not everybody, some people's idea of horror works different than mine. I was just really disappointed by the third act and the end of this movie. I just thought it could have been a lot better, especially considering what they set up. I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10. I think it's a very mixed movie. I'm going to give it, it's obviously higher than 5 because of all the technical aspects, which they really knock out of the park. And I mean, it's just not a movie that I see myself reaching for a lot. I mean, I'm going to keep it in my collection as part of my Blu-ray and DVD collection for sure. It does have some, as I said, it has some visual appeal to it, some visual flair, and some interesting storytelling. And the performances are great. So if I ever do go to watch it again, I know that I'm in good hands in those aspects. Like I said, the technical aspects of the movie are really good. It's just when they try to get into the horror and try to stick the landing, they come up a bit short there, at least in my opinion. So 7 out of 10 overall. At the end of the day, is the rating that I'm going to give Last Night in Soho. Go ahead and comment down below, guys, if you've seen Last Night in Soho. I know it hasn't even been out for a year yet, so that's why I had to be a little bit more careful with my review for this movie as far as spoilers. If you've seen it, did you like it? Didn't you like it? What worked for you? What didn't? Try to keep it spoiler free in the comments. Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos for the rest of this series. And please hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss any of my great horror content I have coming up for the rest of this year. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this review. And thank you for watching. Have a great day. Stay scared.